Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Ascension, The Deviler's Diva reaches a turning point in her life with this powerful E-Steam series story. Get E-Steam Ascension at online booksellers today. When I look at the series of failures as related to the DC Comics brand, I have to ask the executives who run Warner Brothers and the executives who run DC Comics, was it worth it? Was it worth changing the DC Comics universe in 2011? Was it worth changing icons that the world knew like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, and many others to create a new DC universe under the New 52 in 2011? And was it worth all of those changes and adapting all of those changes into movies when it all built up to the climax, which was the failure at the box office known as the Justice League? Now, when I ask those questions, the answer is right in front of us. Was it worth ending the classic iconic DC universe in 2011? No, because when we look at the series of failures since 2011, we clearly see that it really was not worth changing iconic characters to meet some sort of new standard established. Because when we look at those series of failures, from declining comic book sales, declining merchandise sales, and declining box office, it clearly was not worth the risk. And the risk that DC Comics and Warner Brothers executives took was trying to convince people that their new and improved superheroes were better than the iconic characters everyone knew and loved. Everyone knew the red trunks Superman. Everyone knew the Batman who had the yellow oval. Everybody knew the Wonder Woman who had the gold tiara and the magic lasso. Everyone knew those characters, but somebody at Warner Brothers thought everybody would take to like their brand new and improved DC universe. And they continued to persevere even in the face of collapsing comic sales that are way under what the DC brand was selling back in 2002 when Dan Dido took over DC Comics as the president and editor in chief. Now, before he took over, DC Comics at the comic shops was a strong brand. It was a brand that was selling regularly and, moreover, consistently on a regular basis. In fact, DC has always done very well at the comic shop, but he decided to come in and bring in stories like Identity Crisis, which changed the black and white world of the DC Comics universe into a gray place and a darker place. And that's what led to some serious declines with DC Comics. And then he implemented the New 52, which led to a further decline in DC sales as comic fans were alienated by them being told that the universe that they had followed for over 75 years was ending. And then after they were told this, they just decided they didn't have to buy these comics anymore. Moreover, what happened was a complete collapse of Warner Brothers DC Comics merchandising, because I saw this happen on toy store shelves as a toy collector. I walked in and I saw walls of DC merchandise sitting there and walls of DC action figures, t-shirts, and other merchandise just sitting there. People were so upset about this DC brand that they literally stopped buying DC products. And this damage to the DC brand, trickled further down as DC Comics tried to release new movies to compete with Marvel Studios. And the first one, Man of Steel, that they released, managed to deal with a lot of lukewarm reviews and a lukewarm response. And the reason why it dealt with a lukewarm reviews and lukewarm response is because people just didn't like the whole idea of a dark, angry Superman. And yet again, when they released toys, those toys languished on store shelves right next to the New 52 merchandise and some of the DC Universe Classics merchandise, which literally sat on the shelves because they chose the wrong characters, or they chose characters from darker periods of that Dido era. All that merchandise continued to sit there and still continued to sit there as Warner Brothers persevered trying to build its DC cinematic universe. And They continued to do this with Suicide Squad, Batman v Superman, and all that merchandise again continued to languish on toy shelves, and the comics continued to struggle at comic shops, and it led to a literal glut that at many comic stores, with many comic shop owners literally having to force to literally sell these comics for below what they paid for in quarter bins, 50-cent bins, and dollar bins because most people weren't touching DC Comics and its New 52 or the Convergence books or some of the Rebirth books. When it comes down to DC Comics, the brand has suffered severe damage over the last 8, 9 years due to this complete reboot. However, the damage escalated with the release of the Justice League movie. Now, executives were feeling the heat once Batman v Superman came out and the reviews came in roasting the movie, and the movie underperformed at the box office. And there were efforts to start removing people from positions at Warner Brothers as related to the DC Comics brand because the damage was growing more and more extensive to the brand, and retailers were starting to complain about the gluts of merchandise, and comic shop owners were starting to complain about the gluts of product because they were getting stuck with these products and they weren't moving, and the movies just weren't making any money in spite of the budget. Now, Wonder Woman was one of the successes, but the success was primarily due to Patty Jenkins and the passion that she put into the film and the fact that she had a vision for the film. That was one of the reasons why Wonder Woman succeeded. However, at the toy aisle, Wonder Woman struggled, and you can still find Wonder Woman merchandise to this day. And again, that's related to the damage related to the DC Comics brand, which goes all the way back to 2011 and that reboot because many collectors feel no incentive to buy DC products anymore because they feel that there is no consistency to the DC universe and they feel that there is no direction to the DC universe. So they don't want to buy DC products because they feel like there is no real consistency to the universe or any direction to the universe. So they don't know how to build their collections. Moreover, comic fans don't know how to build their comic collections because they don't see that same consistency as related to the DC universe. So there's extensive damage to the brand, and all you have to do is go to a comic shop and see the walls of DC merchandise and DC Comics to understand the damage that was done. Now, the ultimate climax of this damage was the release of the Justice League movie. A trailer came out over a year ago, and that trailer was roasted by many. And the film had so many problems, it was deemed unwatchable in test audiences. And because it was deemed unwatchable in test audiences, they decided to bring Joss Whedon in to do reshoots and to try to repair this movie. Unfortunately, the damage was done, and once Justice League opened and underperformed, we started to see the beginning of the end for the management as it related to this DC product line because the damage to the DC brand is so extensive that it literally is going to require decades to rebuild. And its damage, it was so bad that literally Warner Brothers CEO Kevin Segura is rumored to be considered resigning because the damage is so bad to this DC Comics brand. Now, as I said before, it's going to take decades to rebuild this DC brand because so many people have been alienated by the way Warner Brothers and DC Comics have treated people, and the bad customer service and bad customer relations have alienated hundreds of thousands of comic fans and many other toy collectors and many other people who were longtime fans because once they were told, oh, the DC universe is ending and they got no closure, they had no incentive to keep buying the new products. Moreover, they had no reason to spread the word of mouth about DC's new products. So there's a lot of bad blood as it relates to this DC brand, and that bad blood really needs to be cleaned up by whoever takes charge of Warner Brothers if Kevin Segura decides to resign. Because this DC brand desperately needs a new set of leaders, and there desperately needs to be a house cleaning at DC from top to bottom in all the division brands, from the publishing division with where Dan Dido works right now, and many of the other people like Jeff Johns, Jim Lee and Bob Harris are still struggling to get that brand up to speed, but can't do it because they were the ones who orchestrated the dysfunction. So you need new blood there. The DC licensing brand needs a complete overhaul because a lot of comic shops are now stuck with gluts of product as it relates to their DC collectibles line. And Mattel is still struggling to sell DC product when over a decade and a half ago they had no problem moving lines like DC Universe Classics, the original Batman line, and other action figure 6-inch scale lines, or even smaller lines like Brave and the Bold. They had no problem moving that stuff that's related to the classic universe. But this modern stuff like DC's multiverse, this stuff languishes on store shelves. So there needs to be something done with their licensing and with their own in-house products. And there also needs to be something done as it relates to their cinematic division because there's a lot of people who have been alienated about this dark direction they went in with all their movies, and they now feel like they have no incentive to go see those movies because they don't see the iconic DC characters they grew up with. What most people want from Warner Brothers is a complete overhaul of this DC brand because it really wasn't worth it to change what was working. DC Comics wasn't broke and it didn't need fixing, and the attempts to fix it broke it even further. But the thing with DC is that it's not irreparable and it's possible to rebuild this brand, but all it takes is hiring people with passion, heart, and who care about the DC Comics catalog, the DC Comics superheroes, and want to bring DC Comics back to the next generation of readers and the next generation of comic fans. There are people out there with that passion and heart standing on the sidelines who want to be a part of that process. I would love to be a part of that process. And we would like to see DC rebuilt into something that allows readers access to these characters and shows them what's great about these characters and brings these iconic characters back to life so that the next generation of fans can enjoy them like people have enjoyed them for over 75 years. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct Universe titles like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, The Temptation of John Haynes, and many other books, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.